basically starts with, why do we need to study things related to crime and criminal justice? And that's an easy question. It's so we can deter crime, so we better know how to deter crime, so we better know how to solve crimes. It's better to understand how to rehabilitate individuals, or to just keep the public safe. So there's many more reasons why we want to understand research within the criminal justice, or do research within the criminal justices. But basically it's to understand certain phenomena so people that work in the criminal justices can do their jobs better. And also a certain portion of people that do go into the criminal justices go in there and they're the ones doing the research. So there's, for example, PhDs in criminology and criminal justice, and our statisticians and researchers, and they're individuals who are the ones that go in there and actually do the research. So there's two basic types of realities. Experimental reality, it's, for example, I've had, I guess my fair share of speeding tickets, and I know that if I speed, there's a good chance that I'm going to get a ticket. That's my experiential reality. And then there's agreement reality where, maybe, for example, I've never had a DUI, but I know that if I go out drinking and driving, that there's a good chance that I could get a DUI, and that's because a lot of people have told me that, and that's agreement reality. So what is the role of science in all this? It's the scientific method. So we can come up with empirical research, which is knowledge produced based on our observations or experiences. So certain criteria has to be met. It has to be very logical and empirically supported, and there has to be a methodology to it. There has to be, use that scientific method to do our research. So the goals of research are pretty simple. It's to look at how things are related, to get a better understanding of phenomena. It's to try to find patterns in things, and it also makes us able to more accurately predict things. For example, we have a store, and they're debating whether they're going to spend a lot of money getting the expensive security system, or is it better just to put up a few fake cameras. If they looked at research, possibly that would help them answer the question. Is the $100 fake camera going to deter so much the burglary that it's not even worth getting the $5,000 security camera? So it helps us to look at things like that. Or another example is, street lights. If you put in street lights, is that going to deter the crime that's in that neighborhood, or are we going to need to add more police officers? Secondhand knowledge basically helps us to find a starting point. It helps us to learn, or to ask, what are the research questions? What are we trying to understand? And there's two basic types of secondhand knowledge. There's traditional knowledge, which is we know that something might be a certain way because everybody knows that. Everybody knows that speeding is wrong. Everybody knows that drinking and driving is wrong. But then there's authorities. Authorities are people that have, they're in a position of trust. They oftentimes have higher degrees of education, more experience in a certain field. For example, a judge might say drug courts are effective, and I want one in my my district, and people oftentimes just go with what the judge says because he has or she has authority in that certain area. So much like anything, there's pros and cons to research. There's certain types of research studies that are more valid and reliable than other research studies, and we'll get to that stuff later. But some of the basic errors within human inquiry include inaccurate observations. It's basically not measuring what we came to measure, and we overcome that by using specific instruments to do measuring. Certain surveys and things that might have some statistical validity to that instrument. Overgeneralizing, that basically is saying something like, this certain population of people are more likely to offend than this population of people. And there's not a whole lot maybe of study on that, so you want to keep replicating those studies to say, okay, well, actually, no, this group of people are more likely to offend in that situation. An example of that might be prison boot camps. There might be a few studies that say, prison boot camps are very effective, but there are some studies that say prison boot camps are not effective, so there's some debate within that. But if you went with just the one study that says they're very effective, you might be setting yourself up for providing people with inaccurate information. So, the jury still might be out on that one. One thing that I think is important is politics and a person's ideology. For example, back in the 80s, they had the 3 strikes and you're out was very popular. The war on drugs, the get tough on crime. So the United States got very, very good at fighting crime and imprisoning people. But the downside of that is now we have this huge prison population, and many of these laws still on the books, and we're the bad thing is we're getting people that aren't high risk, high need type of offenders. They're people that are non-violent, chemically dependent, mentally ill types of offenders, and we're not as good at catching the real bad guys. So the error is human, and it's normal to make errors, but do the best you can in research to protect against making errors. Now, looking at the different purposes for why we do research. Exploratory studies oftentimes look at issues in which there isn't a whole lot known about it. For example, I did a study on the quality of life of individuals with schizophrenia after they're released from prison, and there wasn't a whole lot of predictions going into the study. Simply wanted to, there's not a whole lot known about it, so just wanted to just generate more information so future researchers might be able to take that information and use it to develop more defined studies. They oftentimes are used to help start the conversation of a possible policy change. My belief is that individuals with severe mental illnesses are kind of caught up in the criminal justice system because of the failures of the mental health system. And, if we know more about why they end up committing crimes again or end up somehow in the criminal justice system, we might be able to prevent that and steer them into the mental health realm more easily, and to get them the treatment they need rather than the incarceration that they don't need. And these studies can be really simple or really complex. Mine was kind of in the middle. I had a mixed methodology, which means I had a qualitative and quantitative aspect to my studies. Qualitative, we did what we call phenomenology, where we looked at, we did interviews with the folks and tried to come up with themes of what they were saying, and then we did statistical analysis of certain variables related to quality of life, such as housing and family satisfaction and things like that. So the purpose of descriptive research is to basically take the exploratory and take it a step further and try to develop a provisional hypothesis on what's going on. It's trying to nail down a little bit more data. We want to know what the problem's frequency is, the prevalence of it, and and how big that problem actually is. Explanatory research basically does that. We look to explain why things happen. Why are things the way they are? Why does a problem exist? The book gives an example of why do people assault their spouses? Why do people write computer viruses? It's trying to find out why things occur. Applied research is taking programs and policies and basically evaluating those programs to see if they're effective or not. Believe it or not, one of the most difficult things within research is coming up with what we call a research question. Research questions or hypotheses guide us throughout the rest of our research. And oftentimes these come out because of a personal interest of ours, a strong belief we might have, and it's oftentimes comes about because of our personal experiences and observations that we've had in life, or the readings that we've done in the past. And then we start generating these ideas that we want to study. And one of the most important parts, once you have a research question, is to dive into the literature. For example, Wikipedia isn't definitely not a scholarly source, but it helps to start generating ideas. Looking at various websites, the Uniform Crime Report is always a good place to go and just dig through data and see if you can start coming up with ideas. The Bureau of Justice Statistics has all kinds of good stuff. There's many journals within criminal justice and psychology and sociology that can, and books that can help us start thinking about things. I mean, you could be watching an episode of Criminal Minds and think like, wow, that's a really interesting idea. I wonder if there's a whole much research on that. So you go in and you look and see if there's much research on what you just saw on TV. And little things like that, something your 2-year-old nephew might say triggers a thought, and then you dive into the scholarly research after you have a good question in your mind and you start formulating those ideas. So you look at scholarly articles, books, and you find sources wherever you can, and you compile that information, and then you start formulating ideas on I think this is something definitely worth pursuing or not. Now, there are some shortcuts when we're looking at scholarly articles and books. In specific, when you're looking at scholarly journal articles, which is the best source of information usually, you can look to, well, for one, when you put it through a search engine such as Google Scholar or an online library, you can put in your keywords and look for the titles, and if the title doesn't apply to your the search engine comes up with, obviously scrap it. But if the title might apply or you're not sure, read the abstract. The abstract is usually the first thing that you see when you look at a journal article. It provides a good summary in 1 to 2 paragraphs, or about a half a page, of the study. It gives a lot of really good information on the problem, the research methods used, and the conclusions of the study, and recommendations for future research or how to apply those findings. And then looking at books, you don't necessarily want to go out and read 30 books on a certain subject unless you're going to specialize in that for your whole career. But if you're doing a study that you want to get done within 6 months or whatever, it might not make sense to go on and read 30 to 50 books. But you want to take that information you got from the research articles and maybe dive in the index of some of these important books on the subject, and go from there, the index, and just kind of go to the important parts of the books that you need. There's certainly times where you want to read the whole book, like, again, if you're going to study or specialize in something for your career. For example, if you're going to specialize in the psychology of domestic terrorism, you're going to want to probably read the Turner Diaries, which was considered as possibly the blueprint for Timothy McVeigh in the Oklahoma City bombing. That's something that most people that are, who specialize in terrorism or domestic terrorism especially are going to read. A research proposal is just that. It's a proposal for how you plan to carry out your research. In this course, you're going to be required to do a 4 to 5 page research proposal that's due towards the end of the course. So just really quickly, summarizing what's in a research proposal is a problem or objective on what you want to learn, a literature review which summarizes the research that is available on the topic. What is your research question or hypothesis? Who are the subjects going to be? How are you going to measure those subjects? How are you going to collect the data, analyze the data, and then also list